Welcome to Dear Alice, a lifestyle approach to interior design.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dear Alice. I think we're like sweat quite a bit into it, but
It's been a second.
Yeah, it feels good. I'm really hopeful and excited for our 2023. How about you guys?
I am too. I feel very inspired, rejuvenated. 2022 kind of like, it's a blur.
Yeah.
I don't exactly know what happened there.
Yeah.
But I'm ready for a fresh start.
Yeah,
Especially
me too.
with this podcast. I'm so juiced up and rejuvenated.
Oh, for sure. For those of us that are, or for those of you that are just joining us on Dear Alice, we have Suzanne Hall.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Hall.
And Suzanne, what do you do in your real life when you're not recording a podcast?
I have three very, very active boys, all under the age of 7. And I'm just running after them, picking up toys, trying to clean my house, make it a little bit nicer than it was before. It's a happy mess.
I like it.
So,
and what do you do for work?
I'm the VP of design. And so I run a team of designers on all of our new builds at ALID. So tune in. If you're not on, if you haven't followed us on Instagram, please follow along.
Yes.
While we take you through some really, really fun spaces and really fascinating people that we get to design for from the very, very get-go. And we have a lot of fun jobs coming up. And anyway, this year's going to be good. Yeah. It's going to be really good. And we have a lot of really fantastic designers on our team. So I feel super lucky.
Yeah. That Instagram handle is at Alice Lane Interior Design. Mm-hmm. And that shows the interior design side of the business. And then we also have Alice Lane Home.
What's
you
that?
Follow that. That is our, we have a retail store here in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we also have an awesome online store. And I curate everything with our team from just vendors all over the world to make beautiful things available for people that want to purchase them, that love a beautiful lifestyle, all different price points, not intimidating at all. But we just wanted to put a shop on the earth that, was offering different things than what you see everywhere else. So we kind of specialize in transitional, but after doing all these design projects for all the years with Suzanne, we've been at it for 15 years this year.
Crazy.
We just wanted to give a different offering. So we're definitely not a Me Too store, but we do know what clients want because we design homes. And we just wanted to make all that stuff available for purchase for those of you that maybe don't need an interior designer, but still want a beautiful lifestyle. So that's Alice Lane Home. The website will show up, but also the Instagram handle shows the goings on at the retail store and just like the beautiful things and
intros.
Behind the scenes, that sort of thing. So that's at Alice Lane Home. And I'm the owner, Jess Bennett, of Alice Lane and Alice Lane Interiors. And then we've got Cori Place.
Hey, how's it going?
Tell us about what you do for Alice Lane.
I forgot my job title for a second, but it's VP of Product Development and Special Projects. So the Special Projects is like kind of anything that doesn't fall inside of a department. And then, I help design furniture with Jess and get it manufactured. It's super fun. I feel like my life is, I'm always doing little projects and I'm like the gas pedal behind like fun art projects. So whether that's like, helping design product, or I also play in a band. So I'm the gas pedal in that, or like I do, some construction stuff like on the side, building cabinets. And I more just do that for like family and friends because I don't have time for that like professionally, but I just love having
utilize that talent of yours.
What was that?
I haven't utilized that talent of yours as your friend.
Haven't. Yeah.
Cori's like How It's Made. I know. You know that show How It's Made? Yeah. Cori's like how Alice Lane is made. Like hilarious. He makes everything behind the scenes and he fixes things and he tells us why something's broken and he gets it fixed and he
like Olivia Pope. Just handles it.
And he finds an answer for everything. Yeah. So you're like, Cori, I need an answer for this. Yeah.
Yeah. My New Year's resolution is to be able to talk about the projects and promote myself and what I'm doing more. And not feel like bashful about it. Cause I've always been like that. And I think that's been like my biggest hindrance to myself. So thank you for that. I'm going to catalog that. And that's how I'm going to describe myself from here on out.
I love it. So Cori produces the podcast, and fun fact, he produced did the little ditty at the beginning and the end of Dear Alice.
Yep.
Tapped your toe too, I imagine.
That's his band and his skills. And he made that happen for us. Yep. So many other things. Now, getting into it. Today's topic is design through the decades. This is something we've had on the list to do for a very long time. And I kept saying, oh, guys, this is going to be like finals week. We've really got to dig into this. And there's so much to talk about because we've just seen so many things come and go through the ages. We've seen like our parents remember certain things that we don't. I remember my mom when I was in high school, which was in the 90s, and plaid was really big. My mom was like, oh, plaid. I cannot wear plaid again. I've already done it once in high school, and now we're seeing plaid right now again. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think my mom can still wear plaid because she did it in high school. You know what I mean? So we're seeing these trends. Everybody at this table are seeing these trends. If you guys don't mind saying your ages just for fun. So you guys kind of have a barometer of how long we've lived and what we've experienced so far.
I'm 35.
Nice. I'm 39, almost 40.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And I'm 40.
So much younger.
You do.
Thanks.
You so
Thanks,
do.
Cori.
You do. And I'm 47. So I graduated in 1993. Okay. And so you can kind of picture the fashions then. And when did you graduate high school?
2001.
2005.
2005. Okay. So you can kind of get an idea of like how long we've been on Earth, what was trending, what's come around, because it's come around again. Yep. And then how long you've been on Earth listening, and you've seen these things come around maybe more than once. So anyway, we're going to talk about each of the decades, kind of the things that influenced them to be in fashion at the time. We're going to do this for fashion interiors. And then Cori's also going to throw in some things about music that happened.
And then how that also relates to fashion or interiors.
Yeah. Yeah. So design through the decades is what we're doing. And your grandparents, of course, would have been alive for one of these decades. So you might even be thinking of them at a certain time when we're talking about it and remembering grandma's house and what that was like and everything else. So I think it's going to be really fun. Our main focus was just interiors and like, how did we get here? What influenced that? And we, of course, know that fashion, influences interior design and just kind of what's trending. It just is all really connected in some way. And oddly enough, music connects in with it too. So, yeah.
And honestly, all the arts. And then like, as we were kind of dissecting this and like what's happening in interiors, like in the 20s, obviously we know it's Art Deco, but why was it? And what was it before? And what made it Art Deco? Mm-hmm. What inspired that? So I think you'll see a lot of these things are a result of the previous generation, either in opposition to it or a lean into it in a deeper way if it was successful. So
like its own spin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what happened before. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to say, as we go through all of these, just like right now, there's lots of different styles that are currently on the trajectory, even though there might be one dominant style. Mm-hmm. So even though we're kind of diving into what was the predominant style that we were studied in school, and when you like research this, but just know that like at the same time of this style, there was also Queen Anne. So we're not going to get every single hit on everything that was happening because we would be here all day long.
Yeah.
But we're going to do highlights of what was the biggest influence in those decades. And we're not historians, but we're curious and we're designers. And it's been really, really fascinating to dive into each of these decades to really understand the history. So not only like, we'll give you a brief history of what was happening in the world. Then we'll go into, I think, like fashion and then interiors and then music and how all those arts are a result of what was happening in the world. And then also think we'll bring it up to the 20s, which we're in the 2000s. We're in that right now. If you're listening to this, you've lived through a pandemic. You've lived through a couple different recessions. And so all those things are a product of how you're living now. And so it'll be interesting as you live on this earth, how your space and your environment and what you put on your body will produce for the next generations. You know what I mean? So through all this, I think the thing that is the most important to remember is that you are an influence for the future. That sounds really cheesy. That just came out of my mouth, but it's completely true. Yeah. That what you put out on the earth, it stays and it gets remembered. And so I think just cumulatively be more artistic, be more genuine. That's what I've learned throughout all this research. So we're going to start out with a little quote from a graphic designer named Ellen Lupton. She said, "Design is an art of situations. Designers respond to a need, a problem, a circumstance that arises in the world. The best work is produced in relation to interesting situations, an open-minded client, a good cause, or great content." we thought that this was a really good point to make, because as we design, it's usually a result of somebody's situation, be it their home, be it their, you know, they have a child with special needs. They have, you know, whatever it is personally or worldwide, that's how we design. And so I thought that was like a good way to start this off. And so with that, we're going to hop into the 1910s, guys.
Yay.
Most people kind of just jump to the 20s because that's when you're like, it's Art Deco and that's so hot. Let's talk about that.
The Great Gatsby.
I know, exactly.
I love it.
But what happened before the 20s? The 10s. So we're going to start there, which was really interesting. The 1910s was a decade that began at a time of peace and prosperity. America found itself as the richest nation in the world, thanks largely to the growth of huge companies that sold goods all over the world. But then we entered World War I, which America was trying to avoid for a long time. But we entered World War I, and that's when it began to decline. And that's where our story begins. And World War I, just a reminder, it went from July 28th, 1914 till November 11th, 1918. So right, you know, like mid to almost late before we hit the 20s was World War I, where there were 20 million deaths, 21 million wounded, you know, so that's things insane. Like that. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's big. That's bigger than World War II death counts, as we know. Well, actually, we don't know an exact death count for World War II because they didn't provide good statistics. Thanks, Hitler. But you can see that like America was, and I feel like this is a cycle, right? Things are going good, and then shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
Shit hit the fan in World War I. Yep. And that's when things start to...
And it's always traumatic, right? Like bringing it to our day, sorry, but like 2008, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
We just completely see the economy slide off the cliff. And right before then was like this heyday, and everybody was building houses and owned multiple homes. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're really, really doing the very opposite thing. And then all of a sudden economy hits and changes everything. And then you don't even know how to live because like you're upside down. The carpet got ripped out from under you. You know what I mean? And it's just like a complete devastation to the joy and everything else. So really, really, really sad. I'll talk about fashion in the 1910s. Awesome. This era was really the beginning of modern fashion as we know it. The concept of the natural figure became the driving force behind design, which was that women weren't wearing corsets anymore, and they were celebrating their own figures.
Hallelujah.
Isn't that interesting? I would have thought that would have been after the 1950s.
Well, and I think
it kind of like reverted back a little bit, and then now we're in the cycle.
Now
of
we
like
have Skims,
exactly. Yeah.
We're still trying to manipulate our bodies, but I think it also like as you come into the 20th century, it becomes more relaxed. Do you know what I mean? And it becomes more individualistic, and more things are available instead of just that one option, right? Available for all women and all men.
Yeah.
So
and it's continued in fashion ever since. The concept of the natural figure, embracing the concept of the natural figure, fashion moved away from distorting the female shape and stance and went more into practical design approach. So super fun because I think women be able to do more self-expression, and they didn't have to care so much that they didn't look exactly like the other.
Yeah.
Somehow we have influencers right now, and I think links and people are purchasing the exact same thing as her. So hopefully that's not undoing all of this hard work, but hopefully continue to still be an individual. Yeah. I would say not just in fashion, but also in your interiors.
Yeah. And just be thoughtful, be the artistic influence. You know what I mean?
Say it again, Sue.
Be the artistic influence. Like don't just have it be because so-and-so had it and it was an easy link and you threw it in your cart and you bought it.
Yeah.
Like really have a reason why you did it. Be intentional about what you're putting on yourself on the earth. Like your home is an edifice, you guys. Like it's an actual it's a thing. And I know that we can always change things, but a lot of people don't. And they take their builder's word for it, you know, which might not have a lot of artistry, you know, backing it up.
When it feels wrong, it always is. And you know how many times, like even building my house, I was like, you know what? I just let them like take care of it. I'm a very controlling person. Yeah. So I tried, was like, okay, don't be controlling. They'll let them do their job. And I had this feeling, it was like, oh man, that like feels wrong. And I didn't listen to myself. And now there's things that I'm just like, I wish I would have said something or did something, you know what I mean?
And you kind of almost have to just get in a complete flip-flop. Don't think about anything that's ordinary. You know, completely think about like, where am I? What am I going to do? Like, what am I trying to like represent?
Yeah.
And that's what you
like
put on
what
yourself,
makes me happiest and how do I represent that?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I always think about that in music, like what things do I love and how can I like combine those and, you know, create something, you know, that's the same thing like with interiors. And I did that, you know, in my home and and
don't settle because it could be great.
Totally.
So I think, and right now we're looking like we have images that we're staring at for each of these decades that we'll be sharing like via social media and things so that you guys can see kind of like the decades, like as they progress. But as we're like looking at this fashion stuff, you can see that it is a little bit more expressive. You don't just have like dresses and things that are like kind of coming at the waistline, but it feels like a little bit more drapier.
Yeah.
Like you're still going like
there's
to the
different
ankle
silhouettes
versus going like you will raise when we get into the 20s.
Yeah.
You know, we'll go shorter.
Everything's still very modest. But it was the figure itself, I think, more than the individual attributes where, you know, today there's like cleavage and there's waist and there's legs and you got to figure out which one you want to show off. But please don't ever try and do two at the same time.
Leg salad and a boob salad
or three times. Yeah. We don't want your cleavage and your legs. No. Give us one or the other, you know. I think that's sort of
a lip salad or an eye salad. Don't do both.
Yeah, on your face. Yeah. So I think like still be classy about it, which these women were still really, really classy.
Isn't it fun? Like, let's just put a quick plug in for just like vintage clothing.
Yes.
Really fast. When you look at these, like, again, they're so thoughtful. They're so tailored. If you're in Utah and live near Salt Lake, you may have heard of Decades. Jess and I love Decades.
We love it.
Because like when you go in, like you just like start to feel a fabric that feels different. It feels, I don't know, you look at the tags and they're all beautiful.
Yes.
And they're quilted on there. And there was just such like a care.
Yeah.
I don't know, just an artistic expression. I think we lose that with fast fashion.
Yeah.
For sure. So it's fun to look at all these images and be like, wow, somebody drew that.
You know what's fun?
Took great care.
I feel like television is doing a really good job of bringing some of this forward. There's what's this show that's so hot on Netflix and the girls all go get the dresses made at the Modiste and Bridgerton.
Bridgerton.
So like there's those dresses where they're all getting made by the local dressmaker and then
silks are coming in.
Yes. Yeah. It's so fun to celebrate that with them. And then there's also a show that Adam and I just watched, which was called I think it's The Invisible Thread, and it's about a tailor. Daniel Day-Lewis is in it. It's really beautiful, and I think he won the Oscar or something for his role in this. And he's a dressmaker, and we just really watched it over the weekend. And The Invisible Thread is like some sort of thing that happens to seamstresses that are making dresses, and even when they're not, they still feel like they're making the dress or something like. They always feel like they're sewing, something to that effect, but. It's just so beautiful. And the way that they really work through the figure and they put a piece of fabric on the shoulder of the person they're making the dress for, and they see what looks best on their skin color and their eyes. And you know what I mean? Like it was a real art, like they were creating a painting or a sculpture for this individual person, for their figure, right? Thank goodness in the 1910s, they didn't have to manipulate the figures and they just got to celebrate the natural beauty of being a woman, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. There's lovely, I guess, television that shows the art of making fashion back then.
Really, as we were kind of pulling like fashion images for women versus men, I tried to put stuff in for men. So Cori, you could have.
Thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. Anyway, and there is shifts. Like there's little things. We lose a hat, we lose an undershirt, we get a little, prohibitions happening, get a little looser, whatever. But anyway, but it is really fun. I think still today, like women's clothing, there's just such an art form to it. Just we're a complicated figure to tailor for. So
cheers.
I think that is why.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, there's still a lot of like decoration, I think, in the fashion in the 1910s. And we feel that in the interiors as well. The actual style of the 1910s, I still think was the arts and crafts movement. This favored artisan works made from simple forms, which influence from romantic or folk styles of decoration. This movement, you hear about it a lot, like in Europe. It influenced North America between like the 1880 and 1920. And really it's the root of modern design. The British expression to what later came to be called Art Nouveau movement, which is strongly also influenced, but it stood for traditional craftsmanship and often used medieval, romantic, or folk styles of decoration. It advocated economic and social reform and was anti-industrial in its ornamentation. So a couple of things. If you've heard of like William Morris, if you're shopping for wallpapers right now, you've heard of William Morris, you've heard of Macintosh, you've heard of all these people, and they were big players in the arts and crafts movement. And it's interesting because you have this group of people and artists that want to like kind of screw industrialization and go back to something that was more handmade. And that's why you saw a lot of woods and a lot of like craftsmanship there. You saw just a lot of just like, we talk about Untitled, like when there's like artistry movement, same kind of thing that inspired Art Nouveau, this like asymmetrical swoops and things that were also an influence of this. But then you also have like Frank Lloyd Wright, who like when I was researching him at the same time, he's the exact opposite as far as just like wanting to be very clean lined, right?
Which I think we have today, somebody that wants to stand out or be individual to the trend that's happening. And contemporary is always there right now, but he might've been the first to really do it and do it well.
Totally.
Because his wasn't quite as spare, you know what I mean? His was still made in beautiful craft and architecture.
Oh, 100%. And it was completely influenced. This was back when like, especially the architect had like the whole pie. They had like the architecture, they had the interior design, they had the furniture. So Frank Lloyd Wright, just quick on him, sought to design simpler, holistic houses that married site and structure. We obviously see this through his career. We'll talk about Falling Water later on, that famous structure, but both through the interiors and exteriors, his expression of what came to be called prairie style was in full flower by the time he completed the Roby House in Chicago in 1910.
1910.
Yeah. So
if you think of Frank Lloyd Wright, I sometimes think of him as the 50s.
Yeah. I was like, when I read that, I was like, wasn't it like mid-century, you know?
He influenced it.
Yeah.
Right? But that's how all these, like, it's really interesting to give yourself this history lesson because like Guggenheim was the 1930s, guys. That was built in the 1930s. Falling Water, that was also built completed in the 1930s. Crazy. So again, so as far as just like his masterworks, he was working, you know, through the late 1800s into the 1900s, but like what a pedigree, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
But you assume like mid-century is him, but it's actually started so much sooner. And that was in the late 1800s into the early 1900s. And that was between this arts and crafts and his prairie style that he developed, you know.
Amazing. So that's amazing.
Quite remarkable.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that's 1910s. Let's move into the 20s.
All right. Okay.
We all have these big visuals of the 20s. This is very exciting. I'm super excited.
It's the Roaring 20s. I'll just do a quick read. Was a period in American history of dramatic social, economic, and political change. For the first time, more Americans lived in cities than on farms. That's interesting.
That is crazy.
The nation's total wealth more than doubled between 1920 and 1929. So a very prosperous.
That's crazy.
Prosperous decade. And you feel that in the materials.
Recovered from the war.
Yeah, they've recovered from the war.
They're back.
And gross national product expanded by 40% from 22 to 29. The 1920s decade was an age of economic boom. Obviously, we just read that, with more people living in urban areas. The glitzy glamour of the jazz age are remembered in iconic symbols like the Great Gatsby, Flapper Girls, and the Prohibition. Cars like the Model T Ford were instrumental in helping youngsters have the freedom to frequent jazz bands playing at dance halls. I love that description because it also just like this freedom of music, right? Not only are we like hitting it on like fashion changes, interiors change, like in a huge style that had like we're still pulling influence from today, right?
Yeah.
From the Art Deco realm, but like music. You know,
I mean, that's
got looser.
Yeah. The crazy thing about the early 1900s, you know, like Jess spoke, that kind of, it's where like modern day interiors and fashion kind of was born. And then the 1920s that's when the modern day music business was born. Like record labels were created.
Cool.
The gramophone we were talking about this last night over Polo, but that was when that was invented by Alexander Graham Bell. And that was like the first, one of the first machines to play music. So therefore it was recorded music. And then people are like, oh, we can like, you know, grab this and we can sell it to the masses finally. So like record labels were being started and that whole, you know, that thing became an industry. So
artists were born.
Yes. Artists were born.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, some musicians have like their qualms about like, oh, well, people were just like packaging art and like selling it. It's like, well, I mean, they created a bigger pie for everyone to kind of eat from. So yeah, you
guys, this isn't that long ago.
No,
this is 100 years ago, because we're 2020 now. Well, 2022, 2023, I guess. But if I think about my grandma, not my great grandma, just my grandma was born in 1919. Yeah. She's passed away now, but I think she'd be, crazy. Yeah, she'd be over 100 now, but 1919. So this happened in 1920.
This when she was a little girl.
When my grandma was alive, not my great grandma. You know what I mean?
Totally. When Betty White passed away, she was born in 1921 or something like that. I was like, that's so crazy.
How much she's seen.
Yeah. Just everything.
Yeah.
And,
she saw all of this, everything we're going to start talking about now forward.
Mm-hmm. And, wild. And she was in the forefront of everything. It's crazy. I feel like she was fashionable until the day she died. Yeah. So awesome.
Think about this too. I didn't mention this in the 1900s, but that's when the Wright brothers first had their first aircraft. It was the beginning of that.
So aircraft was before the automobile.
I think they were probably
I guess this is the Model T Ford in the 1920s, but there was other automobiles before the Model T.
I think there was a Model A.
Interesting.
I think that was the thing. I'm not a crazy huge car guy, but I think that was one of the first things.
Okay. So automobiles and aircraft are born in the 1900s. Yeah. Wild, you guys. This isn't that old.
Not that long ago.
Crazy. Okay, let's get into fashion. 20s fashion is remembered as for its glitz and glamour, though underlying this was a move towards simplicity in dress. It's so funny. I never think about the 20s as being simple. Mm-hmm. But for women, this meant shorter skirts, simpler shapes, while men enjoyed casual suits. I can picture that Great Gatsby linen suit.
Totally.
He was wearing lighter colors, and the development of a more convenient modern female wardrobe was a major trend of the 1920s and was achieved through the progressive simplification of dress as the decade advanced, a rejection of formality and multiple layers in favor for comfort and lighter, more natural effect.
Can you guys imagine being a fashion designer at this moment and completely throwing everything out?
Total renaissance.
You completely throw everything out.
So exciting.
And just being okay, women are finally starting to get some rights here and there, let's reshape her. Let's reshape how she looks, how she dresses. I think it's so cool for those artists.
They're seeing women's calves for the first time in their whole life.
Yeah.
Other men, not their family members.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
So
the headpieces, sort of the flouncy layers, I think that they could just dance in, right? They could get a lot of movement and looked pretty moving around.
The music was good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I kind of hear all this.
Fun. The colors, the fabrics, just all the things that were expensive were in use. You know what I mean? The war is over. Pull out the silks and the feathers and the finery and just let it all out.
Yeah. Do you remember, do you guys ever watch Thoroughly Modern Mary?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, with her beads, not lying straight and just I don't know, just how iconic just those things needed to be, anyway, I just think it's so fun to think about it in context like that. But yeah, the flappers. Again, we're looking at a lot of images that you can't see right now, but
just highly entertaining. Yeah. The whole thing is just a visual feast and such a fun way to recover from the war and that sort of oppression that they felt at that time.
And shape-wise, it was simpler. But as far as like the decoration, I think it also followed the interiors where we're starting to see more metals, more mirror, more glass, more, you know, just
more expensive materials.
So I don't think that they skimped at all since it was such an affluent generation, decade.
But also when you think about 1920s, like the shapes in Art Deco, they're like curved, and curved is always harder to make than square.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's quite a craft.
So like a more difficult craftsmanship.
Yep. Let's talk to you about interiors. Obviously, everyone has like an idea of what Art Deco looks in your mind, but it's defined as the decorating style of 1920s that originated in France. During that time, France was globally influential in design, art, cinema, and more. The Art Deco visual style originated in France, like I said, and became the first international design to create a global influence of design in buildings, fashion, furniture, and everything from ocean liners to vacuum cleaners. The essence of modern luxury, Art Deco combines like fine craftsmanship and rich materials as the essence of the decade, along with new optimism in technology advancements. So you have like all this, the glitz and curves, but then you also, if you're familiar with like the Bauhaus school, that's when Bauhaus was like beginning too. So in the 1920s, interior design was not all glitz and curves. Bauhaus, the German school of industrial design that decreed from form should follow function, was also born in this era. Bauhaus designers wanted to create beautiful objects that could be mass produced and therefore available to all, not just the rich. Isn't that interesting? Like, because you think about these, I don't know, these styles, and they were for the wealthy, you know, because that's the only ones who could afford the research, that could afford the actual piece. And so it was up to the wealthy to kind of push any movement forward for artists, you know. But like now you're getting this generation of people that's just like, hey, throw it all out. Let's try and like come up with something new. And that is modern design. But they would use steel, glass, plywood, and plastic in their creations. While unconventional materials at the time, they fit with the Bauhaus ethos and practicality. Ultimately, however, the 1920s were all about the bling. People craved a luxurious component in their lives, whether it was leather upholstered furniture or a lucite clock. The jazz age was majority glamour and glitz.
I feel like everything in these lifestyles I'm looking at, like everything's a hero there.
Yeah, more is more.
Yeah. I mean, like the marble, like the brass, like I think, is this like an entrance? That's not an elevator, right? That's like
probably. Well, no, that looks like an entrance to maybe a commercial building.
Yeah, it's insane.
All the wood species and all of
figured, and it's not
chandeliers and the crystals.
The fabrics.
Amazing. The 1920s was like the amount of success to double.
I know.
That's incredible. It's nuts.
But do you even see like one of the images that we're seeing? That is a Kelly Wearstler wallpaper that she took from Art Deco.
Totally.
Completely. We see like these crystal chandeliers. We're specifying these from First Dibs, you know, because they were just such a great scale.
Very fashionable.
You know, because they were such big spaces. But then you do see some like angular stuff too. You know, you have
and I think Bauhaus is really lovely right now as well.
Oh yeah, no, it's totally made a resurgence. But like if you think about like Bauhaus, like Walter Gropius, he was the owner of the first Bauhaus, and he had like people studying underneath him, like Ludwig mies van der Rohe, who did the Barcelona chair. I don't think about the Barcelona chair being invented in the 20s.
No.
Again,
you think it's
like,
the 50s.
It's the 50s.
Yeah.
But it had like a resurgence. But Marcel Breuer did the Wassily chair. So like all these art history frames that we studied, these were created in the 20s at the same time Art Deco was made.
That's wild.
That is crazy.
And it's interesting because you have like this group, all these different groups of people wanting different things, wanting to have something that's just like glitz, glam, custom, all those things. And then you want people that are embracing industrialization. Yeah. That's just like, how do we get more of this modern style to the masses versus just the affluent?
Yeah.
So it's super fascinating just to like think about all those trajectories.
Yeah.
So crazy thing about Bauhaus that it was closed in 1933. And then they all kind of dispersed, but they were closed down by the Nazi regime.
Oh, that's so
because
sad.
They were in Germany and they were kind of seen as like radical thinkers. Oh, isn't that crazy? But we'll get into the 1930s. But I can say, like, don't you think everything in this like little image gallery we're looking at, from the Art Deco style, from Bauhaus to the glitz and glam, we're incorporating into our designs today. Like every single one of them.
Yeah. So. What a great era for design.
What a great era.
Yeah.
And for music and so much cinema.
I applaud them.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. So good.
1920s.
That's great. Okay. Should we get into the 30s?
Get into the 30s.
So sad.
It's so sad, guys.
Great Depression.
We're about to fall.
Yeah, the exact opposite.
And just like that, the nation plunged into the Great Depression. In 1929, the stock market crashed, the banking system collapsed, and the party ended. At the height of the Great Depression, nearly 25% of the total workforce was unemployed. Isn't that crazy? Factories were shut down. Farms and homes were lost to foreclosure, and wages and productivity plunged to a third of their 1929 peak.
Wow. So sad.
The 1930s, it was the decade that was defined by this global economic and political crisis that eventually culminated into the Second World War. It saw the collapse of the international financial system, beginning with the Wall Street crash, which was the largest crash in American history, which is wild.
So sad.
So probably it's going to be a decade of recovery. Well, not recovery, but like a shift, you know, completely.
Of survival.
A shift of survival, and probably of stuff. Like I imagine that they kept what they could from Art Deco. And I bet that obviously they lasted 20s, 30s. Art Deco survived, but just going to talk to us about fashion, and then we'll get into interiors.
Yeah, this was a profound the 1930s fashion saw a profound influence on films, and specifically Hollywood. Men's, women's, and children's fashions were based on fashion seen on screen, like stars Clark Gable, Jean Harlow, Shirley Temple. I remember my mom and dad showing me Shirley Temple.
Yep.
Among the many who directly influenced fashion. That makes sense. We're still influenced by pop culture today.
I know, but it's fun to think that like that's when film was starting.
Yeah.
You know, you had silent film and then you have like these ones that are starting like just that was
like
a whole
the
pioneering.
ultimate influencer. Right? Yeah.
And like you can imagine when you're talking about just like the radio and like these music like things to be able to listen to in your home. I remember my mom saying like before they had a TV, they had a radio and they would just like gather around and they would listen to whatever they could.
Yeah.
You know, get on the old antenna. And it's fun just to think how far we come.
Yeah, it is. There was a return to conservatism after the Roaring 20s, of course, because of the war and the stock market crash. Also marked fashion during this period, that conservatism. That pendulum swinging the absolute opposite direction. The images of the cinema broke a pattern of fashion, which had prevailed for centuries, giving birth to the blue-collar style leader. With more exceptions, all previous fashion had been created by a social elite whose greatest claims were exclusivity and wealth. Now fashion has to percolate up through the classes instead of down.
That's cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Exciting to think that just
women still aren't in blue jeans yet, ladies. We're still in dresses.
But we did.
There are
our
pants.
hemline did.
It looks like the sailor pant is come out in the 1930s.
It looks like the hemline dropped back down from the 20s.
Back to conservative. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's just a reaction.
Got chilly.
Yeah.
You know? Oh.
Yeah.
But everyone feels a little bit more relaxed, probably because of Prohibition. There's one fellow that's just like, they're not all the way buttoned up. You know, they have a few buttons off. They're not wearing undershirts.
Yeah. It looks like pattern. There's more pattern now. Less fabulous fabrics, but then you're seeing it in, like you're seeing prints at least that would maybe hopefully help them feel happier
I know.
during that time.
You're seeing hats, but you didn't really see a ton of hats.
Yeah.
You saw a lot of like headbands and headdresses like that in the 20s, but then you start to see some hats come back in the 1930s,
and it looks like
really
center parts on the men, center hair parts, and then slicked back or hats.
And less like tight tailored suits and looser and
yeah.
Yep.
They're probably more affordable to not have a perfect tailor, more off the rack.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. One size fits all.
That's more like all of us today. None of us really, not a lot of us go to a tailor, I don't think.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's happening in music at this point?
It was like big band stuff was really huge. So the best like example of that, if you know what it is, like I always think of The Notebook.
Yeah.
And you know, like when she's getting engaged to the one guy and they're at that like club and there's like, you know, they have like a woodwind section and like there's like, you know, conductor leading it, but there's like drums and stuff like that and, you know, guitar. That's big band. So Duke Ellington was a popular artist, big band artist. I don't know a ton of them because I wasn't, you know, I'm not huge into that, but that's like kind of where music was. And
huge live performances, big bands, right? Not little
like
little
3 or 4
bands on a
pieces.
stage.
Yeah. It's like 30 people. Yeah. So
My
production.
grandpa was part of a big band. Grandpa Harley, my dad's dad.
That's awesome.
Played the sax.
Oh, no way. That's
Played a few different
foxy.
instruments, but we have some really cool images from him. This is actually a really fun project for you guys. Go back in your family history and find pictures of your family from these eras. Like it's quite romantic to just like see them in that place, in that decade.
That's awesome.
Okay, 1930s, that's when we see a little bit more modernism. Austerity quickly replaced Art Deco glamour. Most people no longer had money to spend on home furnishings, so minimalism became a necessity, not an aesthetic choice. Compared to homes in the 20s, rooms were more open and spacious because people had fewer belongings. There were cleaner, less cluttered look, with little to no art on the walls. To make up for the sparsely furnished rooms, people hung floral and striped wallpapers and laid down hooked floral rugs. To visually fill the space. Colors became more subdued to soothe the somber mood of the era and included soothing neutrals and cheerful pastels. Isn't like the theory of color too? Like you see that changes dependent on what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
You know, like in Art Deco, you see like a lot of rich tones. Like there is nothing that feels dry or muted or grayed out.
Yeah.
And then now
it's like shiny and nothing's dull and everything's glamorous. Everything was a hero. And now, now much, much simpler what feels almost normal, except for the architecture is still really stunning on this page that we're looking at.
And I wonder if that was also like a product of just how long it took to create large structures like from that would start possibly in the 20s or, you know, just like with that modernist.
Yeah.
Because this is when the Guggenheim was completed. I think it was like 1939.
I think it'd be interesting to see though when that
building
started, the plans, and then how long the construction took. You know what I mean? Like so much longer, probably a decade.
Idea originated.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But falling water too was I think also late 30s. So anyway, a lot of really like modern movements forward, which is incredible.
That is incredible.
Okay.
1940s.
1940s. What a decade. Oh man. The 1940s were defined by World War II, the Holocaust, atomic bombs, and the beginning of the Cold War. My mom was born in the 40s. When was your mom? Yeah.
Crazy.
45. Both my parents were.
Yeah. So I think my mom and dad might be a decade younger than your folks. So they're 45, then 55.
Yeah.
Maybe? Sorry, a decade younger than her folks. Yeah.
The baby, I was a surprise.
Okay.
Surprise. Okay. Women were needed in the workforce to replace men who went to war, and wartime production pulled the U.S. out of the Great Depression. Upon the return of the GI Bill, entitled soldiers to a college education. World War II defined the 1940s. Hitler's forces swept through Europe. There's like a lot of stuff here to unpack. Your heroes through the Pacific, and here at home, our energy, materials, and industrial strength went into flight. For the first half of the decade, almost nothing happens in the interior design world because of the war. Factories stopped creating furniture and consumer goods and began making tanks, bullets, and fighter planes to supply our troops. Even the creation of Fiesta dishware became to a halt. Fiesta dishware. So its manufacturer could shift resources to produce China for armed forces. When the war ended in 45, a new era began. The soldiers came home and they're ready to buy a house and start a family. Gatlin said, there's a huge boom in residential building while factories retooled from war production. A material shortage meant new houses were built small and at a low cost. Most homes built in the late 1940s had 2 bedrooms and averaged just under 1,000 feet.
Wow.
Oh, and that's how you get like the war houses that are just like stacked was because of that boom.
Wow. That is so crazy.
You guys, in World War II, like 35 million to 60 million were killed. Wow. That's such a gap because the statistics were so inexact because of the counts. Like there just wasn't a record probably
so depressing. Evil. And it looks like the war lasts about 6 years.
Yeah.
Almost exactly to the day.
To 45.
Yeah. That's so hard. You guys, we lived through a pandemic that lasted, 2-3-ish years. Still going on, but we have cures now.
Comfortable in our homes.
In our homes, yeah. In our loungewear that wasn't...
loungewear got up big.
It didn't have to conform our figures to it.
Yeah, the amount of anxiety due to ambiguity, like that, like what we've gone through versus, that generation is just vastly different. Like I feel we're lucky.
I know. All those times that like your grandpa says, I had to do this. I'm just going to be like, you're right. You had it a lot worse than I did.
Yeah,
totally.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, they must really shake their heads at us. Should we do fashion for the 1940s?
Let's do it.
Okay, so despite the hardship of the war, fashion in the 40s still ruled as women everywhere embraced more utilitarian yet chic looks. And Hollywood's golden age stars from Rita Hayworth to Katharine Hepburn dazzled these gorgeous gowns. Now, we actually have heard these names. These are people we know. When it comes to 1940s fashion, Christian Dior was one of the most influential designers, thanks to his groundbreaking new silhouette, which redefined women's post-war style and revived France's fashion industry after a difficult few years. The collection, featuring gorgeous full skirts and waist-cinching jackets, sounds like the 50s, huh? Was Dior's first look and became forever known as, quote-unquote, new look. After Harper's Bazaar editor Carmel Snow said in 1947, it's such a new look, end quote. Imagine if every designer would knock together something like this for their first debut.
But even like luxury and designers and things probably finally had, an audience. to watch him, because before it was just like, you did this thing, you know.
Communication was growing. So, you know, there's publications and there's radio, you know, like we're talking about radio. Yeah.
Yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so the war ends in 45 and this Christian Dior suit debuts, and is commented on in the magazine in 1947. So, I think people are
such a looker.
People are finally ready to maybe start to adopt things and think more about fashion and maybe start to invest in fashion again, or at least the wealthy are.
Yeah.
So I wonder when Christian Dior was born, but that's interesting. That's when it like caught fire, and we finally had this really beautiful look. Also, like you see like the men coming back from war and the women all dressed really beautifully, trying to catch a soldier's attention. And some of that imagery is just so beautiful. Oh my gosh. Okay. So Christian Dior, was that her birthday in 1905? Or is that when the brand was born?
I think it was when she was born, or he was born. Dior was born on January 21st, 1905.
Okay.
It's almost his birthday.
Oh my goodness. Happy birthday, Christian Dior. Thanks for dressing the women so beautifully. Yeah. What a gorgeous snapshot of this woman and that silhouette. And the women just really dressed like women, you know, they put in the time and the effort, and they had the entire look, you know, head to toe, soup to nuts. They left nothing out, including gloves. You know what I mean?
No, it's nuts.
Just beautiful. The long pleats on the men's, you know, their clothes. And this is actually, a lot of it's starting to look a little bit more like Elvis. Mm-hmm. I think the silhouettes of the hairstyles and the higher waisted pants and the pleats and the drapiness of the pant.
Women aren't really like casualing down, except for the fact that probably more pants were being introduced as an option.
Yeah. Amongst all of these, I'm only seeing one pair of pants, but maybe she's already a married lady and already got her soldier, you know?
Yep.
Okay. What was happening architecturally in the 1940s?
Okay. Yeah. This was the beginning of the mid-century, like movement, modern movement. It started to take root in the 1940s, but it didn't flourish until after the end of World War II, which was in 45. Art Deco and Art Nouveau were still popular in the first half of the 1940s. This is fun. Chinoiserie, which is kind of an Asian influence of ornamentation, might have been a more 19th century fad, but it made a strong comeback in the 1930s and 40s, and its presence continued well into the 40s, especially as international travel and trade opened up post-war years.
Yes.
So people are finally starting to be able to travel.
Yeah.
These years. Home design styles in the 40s straddled the 20th century. On the one hand, kitchens were still fairly small. Linoleum was still widely used as a floor covering. Colors often hovered in the range of pastels. Shapes like scallops, sweeps, and curves were common. Unfinished pine was a favored, inexpensive wood often used for kitchen cabinets. These were touches that harkened back to an earlier, more innocent age before the war. Probably still recovering, you know.
Pine's always been affordable.
Yeah.
Like you think about people that couldn't afford a coffin, always got buried in a pine box, you know?
Yeah. The Bauhaus-inspired modern movement and streamlined design were making an impact. Interior colors of that time were soft and dusty with creamy yellows, blued gray, soft pinks, and accents in deep forest green and burgundy.
Sounds like the 90s. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think this is the time, too, that we have a second image in here that you see, Jess and Cori, that's in Palm Springs. So we're starting to see kind of an influx since Hollywood is finally like become a thing. We're starting to see like, you know, Hollywood kind of into the Palm Springs movement, which obviously is a huge mid-century.
Yeah. And I feel like it's still still stuck in that capsule, which is why everybody just loves it and it's so celebrated. Yeah.
It's an escape.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it stayed pure to what it is. Yeah. So good. Okay, guys, we are going to catch you on the next one for the 1950s through today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this is as fun for you as it is for us. I think it's important for those of us that love design to be informed about where it came from and how we got here and what influences us. And we'll help you even better predict what's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a real gratitude.
Total gratitude. Yeah. And hopefully want to make you sit down with your parents and grandparents for some story time and understand kind of how they were affected through these decades and what their lives were like and what they wore and what their favorite memory of their dress was or whatnot, because it just helps us appreciate so much. All right. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for listening. thanks for listening. If you like our show, please leave a 5-star rating.